Welcome to the Health Headliner podcast by Tudu Digital. Our content is informational only and not medical advice. Please consult your provider. Now, let's dive into today's headlines.
I want you to just, for a second, picture a huge, really complex mixing board. You know, like in a top-tier recording studio.
Right. Thousands of sliders, knobs, dials.
Exactly. Some of them control the bass, some control the volume, some adjust the clarity of, I don't know, a singer's voice. Now imagine that entire mixing board is your body.
That's a great analogy.
And instead of audio frequencies, those sliders are controlling your blood sugar, your stress levels, your ability to focus, and even your ability to make a clear, rational decision.
And most of the time, we're not even aware that those sliders are moving. We just feel the result.
We just feel the output. We feel that, that sudden energy crash after a meal, or the overwhelming static of anxiety that seems to come from nowhere.
Biologically, that's exactly what we are. We're just a collection of feedback loops, always oscillating. And when those loops lose their calibration, when the signal-to-noise ratio gets all distorted, that's when things start to go wrong. That's pathology.
And we lose control. But not because of some, failure of willpower.
No, not at all. It's because the chemical levers are literally stuck in the wrong position.
And that is the entire premise of today's deep dive. We are exploring this idea of chemical control. We're looking at two brand new pieces of research, both just out this month, January 2026, that suggest, that nature and neuroscience are revealing new ways to hack that mixing board.
Right. How to get in there and manually adjust the sliders.
We're going to look at how to dampen the noise, so to speak, in two really different systems. First, the metabolic chaos of diabetes, and second, the neural chaos of addiction.
It's a fascinating pairing of studies because on one hand, you've got a paper from the Beverage Plant Research Journal. It's an analysis of the hidden molecular architecture of roasted coffee beans.
That's something incredibly familiar.
And on the other hand, we have this really rigorous neuroscience paper from a journal called eNeuro that's all about alcohol use disorder and the deep circuitry of the brain.
So we're going from the breakfast table straight to the clinical ward. The mission today is to understand how these very specific molecules, whether they're brewed in a pot or synthesized in a lab, can act as the brakes for a system that's just spinning out of control.
A system in overdrive.
So let's start with the one that's probably sitting on a coaster next to a lot of you right now, the coffee bean.
This is a study led by Minghua Qiu at the Kunming Institute of Botany. And usually when we talk about the health benefits of coffee, the conversation gets a little vague.
Right. You hear antioxidants, maybe polyphenols. It feels more like marketing copy than hard science a lot of the time.
Exactly. But this team, they were not interested in vague correlations. They wanted to find the specific bioactive mechanics. They didn't just brew a pot and, taste.
No, they used some serious hardware. Things called nuclear magnetic resonance and liquid chromatography mass spectrometry.
And we should probably pause on those for a second because the methods really tell the story here. They show the level of detail we're dealing with.
So what is nuclear magnetic resonance? It sounds intense.
It is. Think of it as an MRI, but for individual molecules. It lets researchers see the actual atomic skeleton of a compound by measuring the magnetic properties of its atoms. It gives you the blueprint.
And the other one, mass spectrometry.
That one is all about weight. It weighs molecules with incredible precision, so you can figure out exactly what a compound is made of.
So they're taking this chemical soup that is coffee extract with thousands of different compounds floating around in it, and they're basically dismantling it piece by piece, atom by atom.
They're looking for needles in a haystack. That's the perfect way to put it.
And they found some.
They found needles we didn't even know existed. They identified 3 completely new compounds that had never been cataloged before. They gave them the names Caffealdehydes A, B, and C.
Wow, brand new.
Brand new. And on top of those, they managed to isolate 3 other substances that are notoriously difficult to even detect. Things like dihydrocaffeic acid and some quittic acid derivatives.
Why are they so hard to find?
Because they're usually completely masked by the sheer abundance of caffeine and chlorogenic acids. Those are the big, loud signals in coffee. These other compounds are the quiet ones hiding in the background.
So finding a new molecule is a huge win for a chemist, I imagine. But for the rest of us, the real question is utility. I mean, what do these caffealdehydes actually do?
And that's where the study pivots. It moves from pure chemistry to a massive health problem, type 2 diabetes, which is, at its core, a problem of regulation, a problem of control.
Okay, so how do they connect?
To get the connection, you have to understand a little bit about digestion. When you eat carbohydrates, bread, pasta, potatoes, whatever, your body can't absorb them as they are. They're these long chains.
They're too big.
Way too big. They need to be broken down into simple glucose, which is sugar. And there's an enzyme in your gut called alpha-glucosidase that does this job.
You called it the body's scissors in the outline. I like that.
It's exactly that, in a pair of molecular scissors, and it just snips those long carbohydrate chains into little pieces of sugar, which can then pass into the bloodstream.
And in a healthy person, those scissors work at a nice, steady pace. Manageable.
But for someone with diabetes, or even pre-diabetes, the system is, let's say it's too efficient. Those scissors work way too fast.
So you get a flood of sugar all at once.
Exactly. A huge, rapid spike in blood sugar the body's insulin system just can't handle. And that spike is the dangerous event. Over time, it leads to inflammation, damage to your blood vessels, all the long-term complications of diabetes.
So the goal of any treatment would be to, what, slow down the scissors?
You've got it. That's the whole game. If you can inhibit that alpha-glucosidase enzyme, if you can make those scissors work more slowly, the sugar enters the blood more gradually. The spike becomes a gentle hill. You flatten the curve.
And we already have drugs that do this.
We do. Acarbose is a very common one. It's a standard pharmaceutical designed to block this exact enzyme. But this is where the study becomes, I think, truly surprising.
What did they do?
The researchers took these newly discovered coffee compounds, the Caffealdehydes, and they put them head-to-head against Acarbose, the drug, to see which one was a stronger inhibitor, which one was better at slowing down the scissors.
Okay, a showdown? How do you even measure that?
They measure it using something called the IC50 value. It stands for inhibitory concentration 50%.
Right.
It's a standard metric in pharmacology. It basically asks the question, how much of this substance do I need to add to cut the enzyme's activity in half?
So a lower number is better. It means the stuff is more powerful.
Exactly. A lower IC50 value means it's more potent. You need less of it to get the job done.
And the results of the showdown?
The Caffealdehydes won, and not by a little. They were significantly more potent.
Really? More than the prescription drug?
Yes. Their IC50 values range from about 17.5 to 45 micromoles.
Yeah.
Acarbose, the synthetic drug, has a higher IC50 value in this kind of test. What that means is, molecule for molecule, these compounds that are naturally created when you roast coffee beans were chemically stronger at blocking that digestive enzyme than the standard pharmaceutical designed for that very purpose.
That is just, it's a remarkable finding. It almost sounds like the roasting process itself, just applying heat to a bean, is acting like a little chemical synthesis lab.
That's a great way to think about it. It's creating these highly effective molecules for metabolic control, maybe by accident.
So what are the implications here?
Well, it creates a really compelling argument for the development of what we call functional foods. Now, we have to be cautious.
Of course.
This was an in vitro study. That means it was done in a test tube, in a lab setting, not in a living, breathing human being.
So we don't know if it would work the same way inside the body?
We don't. But the potential is vast. You could imagine a future where coffee extracts are standardized not for their caffeine content, but for their caffealdehyde content, specifically to help people manage their blood sugar.
That really reframes the whole conversation. It shifts from just avoiding sugar to actively controlling how your body processes sugar.
That's the key.
And I want to use that exact concept, the idea of control, of dampening a spike, to transition us to our second topic, because we're about to move from the blood to the brain and from sugar to stress.
This brings us to the study from Boston University on alcohol use disorder. And the stakes here are just incredibly high. The paper opens by noting that AUD, as it's known, affects 29 million people in the U.S. alone.
And it results in over 140,000 deaths every year. It's a massive public health crisis.
It is. And a big part of the problem is that our current pharmaceutical tools, they're often inadequate. They don't work for everyone.
And these researchers are arguing that part of the reason for that might be that we're targeting the wrong system. We usually think of addiction and we immediately jump to dopamine.
The pleasure chemical, the reward circuit.
Right. But this deep dive, this study, it focuses almost entirely on a different neurotransmitter. Norepinephrine.
Norepinephrine is basically the brain's version of adrenaline. It's the chemical that's responsible for arousal, alertness, and the fight-or-flight stress response.
And it operates on what you call the Goldilocks principle.
It does. You need a moderate amount of it, just the right amount, to be awake, focused, and able to learn new things. If you have too little, you're drowsy and unfocused. But if you have too much,
you're in a state of high anxiety, tremors, your thoughts are scattered.
Your brain is just buzzing with static. And the central idea of this study is that chronic alcohol use pushes the brain out of that optimal Goldilocks zone, and as we said before, it jams the lever in the high-stress position.
And it gets stuck there.
That is the core pathology they're investigating. The researchers looked at the brains of mice that had a history of heavy, long-term alcohol intake, and they focus on two specific regions of the brain.
Where did they look?
The first is an area called the locus coeruleus. This is the brain's primary factory for norepinephrine. It's where most of it comes from.
Okay, that makes sense.
But the second area is really interesting. It's the nucleus tractus solitarius, or NTS, which is located way down in the brainstem.
The brainstem. That's usually associated with really basic autonomic functions, right? Like heart rate, breathing, gut signals.
Exactly. And finding it involved here suggests this really deep primal connection between physical stress, like what's happening in your body, and the psychological state of addiction.
So what did they find in these two brain regions?
They found that in these alcohol-dependent mice, both the locus coeruleus and the NTS were, for lack of a better term, switched on to a pathological degree. They were hyperactive.
And how can you tell if a brain area is hyperactive?
They look for specific cellular markers. One is called delta phosphB. You can think of delta phosphB as a kind of fossil record of neural activity. It's a protein that slowly accumulates inside neurons when they've been firing excessively over a long period of time.
So it's a sign of chronic overstimulation.
Precisely. And the most crucial part of this finding was when these markers were elevated. It wasn't just when the mice were drinking.
You mean it was even after they stopped?
Even 24 hours into withdrawal. This is the critical insight of the entire paper. The brain of someone with AUD isn't just craving pleasure. It is actively drowning in its own stress chemicals.
So the norepinephrine system is just screaming constantly.
It's screaming, and in that context, alcohol starts to look different. It acts as a temporary depressant to quiet that horrible noise. But as soon as the alcohol wears off, the noise comes back even louder than before.
It's a vicious cycle. You're basically self-medicating against a stress response that your own brain is creating.
A hyperactive stress response.
Yeah.
So the mission then becomes, how do we manually turn down that volume? If the norepinephrine system is the problem, can we find a drug to inhibit it?
And that's where they set up the showdown between two different drugs that both target the same thing, the alpha-2 adrenergic receptor.
Let's unpack that. The alpha-2 adrenergic receptor acts as a kind of auto brake on the system. When this receptor is stimulated, it sends a signal back to the neuron that says, hey, that's enough. Stop releasing norepinephrine.
So it's the off switch.
It's the brake pedal.
Yeah.
And both drugs they tested, Clonidine and Guanfacine, are designed to push that brake pedal.
Okay, so let's look at the first contender, Clonidine. You mentioned this is an older drug.
Very old. It's primarily used for high blood pressure, and sometimes it's used off-label to help people manage opiate withdrawal. So there's a history of it being used in substance use contexts.
And did it work for the alcohol-dependent mice? Did they drink less?
It did. It absolutely reduced their alcohol intake.
Yeah.
At the right doses, the mice given Clonidine drank significantly less alcohol. So on the surface, a success.
What?
But Clonidine is what pharmacologists call a dirty drug. Now, that doesn't mean it's impure. It means it lacks specificity. It's not a sniper rifle. It's a shotgun.
It hits more than just the target.
A lot more. It binds to the alpha-2A receptor, which is the one we want, but it also hits the alpha-2B, the alpha-2C, and a completely different class of receptors called imidazoline receptors.
And that lack of precision, that hitting other targets, it causes collateral damage, side effects.
Significant collateral damage.
Yep.
The study detailed some really severe side effects. First, the mice experienced profound hypothermia. Their core body temperature dropped to dangerous levels.
Okay, that's not good.
Not at all. And second, and this is maybe even more problematic for treating addiction, was heavy sedation.
So it made them drowsy.
More than drowsy. The study noted that when the mice on Clonidine did drink alcohol, the sedative effects were massively compounded.
What does that mean in practical terms?
They measured it by looking at something called the righting reflex. Basically, how long it takes a mouse to get back on its feet after being sedated. The mice on Clonidine and alcohol, they were essentially knocked out for a much, much longer time.
And that is a huge safety risk.
It's a deal breaker. If you give a drug to a person to help them stop drinking and they have a moment of weakness and have a drink, you absolutely cannot have a drug interaction that renders them unconscious. It makes it completely unsafe for outpatient therapy.
So that brings us to the second contender, Guanfacine. This is a newer drug.
Much newer. It's currently FDA approved for treating ADHD in children. Its main use is for focus and attention.
And how is its profile different from Clonidine? Is it more specific?
That's the whole point. Guanfacine is a precision instrument. It is highly, highly selective for just the alpha-2A receptor. It's the sniper rifle. It targets the one brake pedal we need, and it completely ignores the others.
And did the results in the study reflect that specificity?
They did, perfectly. Guanfacine also significantly reduced alcohol intake in the mice. And interestingly, it was effective at much lower doses than Clonidine was.
But the crucial finding, I'm guessing, was about the side effects, or the lack of them.
Exactly. There was zero hypothermia, absolutely no drop in body temperature, and zero sedation.
Yeah.
And this is the critical part. When the mice on guanfacine drank alcohol, it did not knock them out. It didn't potentiate the sedative effects of the alcohol at all.
So it just reduced the drive to drink without shutting down the body's other systems.
It's a much cleaner, safer mechanism. That safety profile alone is a potential game changer for addiction medicine.
But the study didn't stop there, did it? They didn't just measure how much the mice drank. They asked a much deeper, more profound question.
They did. They asked, does this drug actually repair the brain? This brings us to the whole concept of executive function and the part of the brain that's in charge of it, the prefrontal cortex.
CEO of the brain.
That's the one. It's responsible for planning, for decision-making, for impulse control. It's the part of your brain that thinks about consequences. And we know that chronic alcohol use physically damages this region. It effectively takes the CEO offline.
Which is why just telling someone to use willpower is often so futile.
It is. The neural hardware that's required to exert that willpower is broken.
So the researchers needed a way to test this, to see if guanfacine could bring the CEO back online. And they used this really clever cognitive task called temporal order memory.
We really need to explain this clearly because it's such a fascinating way to ask a mouse a very complex question about its memory.
So how does it work?
It works like this. In the first phase, you put a mouse in a chamber and you let it explore two different objects. Let's say a little red block and a blue sphere.
Okay, block and sphere.
Then after a delay, you put the mouse back in. This time it sees one of the familiar objects, say the red block, and a brand new object it's never seen before. Then after another delay, you do it again, but with the other familiar object, the blue sphere, and another new object.
So you're building a timeline of experiences for the mouse.
You're building a timeline. The final test is you put the mouse back in a chamber with just the two original objects, the red block and the blue sphere. A healthy mouse, with its natural curiosity, will spend more time exploring the object it saw less recently. It's a way of asking which of these two things is older news to you.
It's a test of timeline reconstruction. Which came first?
Exactly. And why is that specific skill, remembering the order of events, so incredibly important?
I would guess it's fundamental to everything.
It's a direct proxy for executive function. It requires the prefrontal cortex to organize information into a coherent sequence. If you can't order events in time, you can't understand cause and effect. You can't plan for the future. You're trapped in an endless immediate present.
And the mice with a long history of alcohol use, how did they do on this test?
They failed it miserably. They couldn't distinguish the timeline at all. They explored both objects equally, which shows their working memory was completely fragmented.
But then they treated these same mice with guanfacine.
Yes. And this, for me, is the headline moment of the entire study. The cognitive deficit was reversed.
Completely.
The drug didn't just suppress the physical craving for alcohol. It restored the cognitive machinery that had been broken. It repaired the brain.
It put the CEO back in charge.
It put the CEO back in the corner office. It essentially restored the signal-to-noise ratio in the prefrontal cortex. By clearing out all that norepinephrine static, it allowed the decision-making circuits to function normally again. The treated mice performed just as well on that memory test as control mice that had never even been exposed to alcohol.
And there was a really significant finding in this part of the study related to sex differences, wasn't there? This is so crucial because so often this kind of research only uses male subjects.
Yes, and the researchers here deserve a lot of credit. They used both male and female mice throughout the study, and what they found was fascinating. First, the female mice actually suffered worse baseline deficits in memory after the alcohol exposure.
So their brains were more sensitive to the damage.
It appears so. But, and this is the key part, the female mice also responded more strongly to the guanfacine treatment. The drug was even more effective at restoring cognitive function in the female mice than it was in the males.
That is a huge finding. It suggests that this alpha-2A mechanism might be a particularly powerful target for treating women who are in addiction recovery.
It absolutely does. It highlights the urgent need for gender-specific approaches in medicine, right down to the dosing and the therapeutic strategy. If they'd only tested males, they might have concluded the drug was only moderately effective and missed its incredible efficacy for the female brain.
And just to be thorough, they ran some other cognitive tests, right, to make sure guanfacine wasn't just some sort of, I don't know, magic brain-boosting pill.
They did. They wanted to ensure the effect was specific, so they tested spatial location memory. This is basically asking the mouse if it notices that an object has been moved from one corner of the chamber to another.
And what happened?
Guanfacine had no effect on that task, and that's actually a really good thing.
Why is that a good result?
Because that type of spatial memory is governed by a different part of the brain, the hippocampus. The fact that guanfacine didn't affect it confirms that the drug is specific. It's a targeted repair. It's fixing the working memory circuits in the prefrontal cortex, and it isn't just indiscriminately stimulating the entire brain.
Okay, so let's pull back and try to synthesize these two. On the surface, very different reports. A clear theme seems to be emerging.
There's a very strong connecting thread.
Both the diabetes study with coffee and the addiction study with guanfacine are telling us that pathology, whether it's metabolic or neural, often stems from a system that lacks inhibition, a system without brakes.
That's it. In modern medicine, we so often focus on what's missing, on deficiencies. What vitamin do we need to add? What chemical do we need to boost? But these studies suggest that often the problem isn't a deficit. The problem is too much signal.
Too much sugar flooding the bloodstream because that enzyme is working too fast.
Or too much stress chemical flooding the brain because the norepinephrine neurons are firing out of control.
So the solution then is not to hit the accelerator, it's to find the brake pedal.
You have to find the brake pedal.
Yeah.
The Caffealdehydes in roasted coffee provide the brake for digestion. Guanfacine provides the brake for the brain's stress response. It is all about restoring balance by dampening the noise.
So what are the practical implications of all this? Let's start with the coffee research. Are we really looking at a future where a doctor might prescribe a specific roast of coffee for someone with prediabetes?
The functional food market is certainly moving in that direction. The identification of these specific caffealdehydes provides a blueprint. You can see the development of supplements or maybe extracts from coffee fruit that are standardized to contain a guaranteed high level of these inhibitors.
A more natural dietary approach.
Exactly, something that could complement traditional medication. But again, we have to reiterate the limitation here. This was in a petri dish. We need clinical trials to see if these compounds actually survive human digestion and get absorbed into the bloodstream in high enough quantities to make a difference.
And what about the alcohol use disorder research? That one feels like it has a much more immediate path to the clinic.
It absolutely does. As we said, guanfacine is already an FDA-approved drug. It's on the market. It has a 20-year safety record from its use in pediatric ADHD. This is a perfect example of what's called drug repurposing.
We don't have to spend a decade and $1 billion inventing a new molecule from scratch.
Exactly. We have a tool that we already know is safe, and this study provides powerful evidence that it targets the exact mechanism, that broken alpha-2A receptor system that seems to be at the heart of the addiction cycle.
And it also fundamentally shifts how we should be viewing the disorder itself. I mean, if the prefrontal cortex is chemically compromised, the individual literally lacks the biological hardware to make the rational decision to stop.
That is the most critical takeaway for me. Addiction is so often framed as a moral failing, a weakness of character, a lack of will. But this data shows, in stark detail, that it is a mechanical failure of the brain's braking system.
It's physiology.
It's physiology. Asking someone whose brain is in that state to just stop is like asking someone to stop a car that has no brake fluid. The mechanism is broken. Guanfacine looks like a way to repair the brake lines. It gives the patient the cognitive space, the return of executive function, that they need to actually engage with therapy and make different choices.
So it provides the physiological stability that's required for the psychological recovery to even begin.
Precisely. It doesn't cure the addiction on its own. No pill will ever do that.
Yeah.
But it quiets the biological noise enough for the person to finally be able to do the hard work of recovery.
So as we wrap up, what's the action item here? For the listener who wants to apply this knowledge or maybe just understands their own body and mind a little better after hearing this.
I think on a broad level, the big takeaway is to start paying more attention to your own internal noise. Recognizing that states of high anxiety or scattered focus, or even those post-meal sugar crashes, are real chemical events. They are fluctuations on that internal mixing board.
It's not a personal failing.
No. And framing it that way can be really empowering. It moves us away from self-judgment and toward a more curious mechanical question. Okay, which slider is out of calibration, and what can I do to gently nudge it back?
And for all the coffee drinkers out there,
Maybe just take a moment to enjoy the incredible complexity in that cup, to realize that the simple act of roasting a bean is creating a sophisticated chemical factory, and your body is interacting with that chemistry in profound ways we're only just beginning to understand.
and finally, for anyone out there who has been touched by the struggle of addiction, either personally or through family or friends.
Let this be a genuine beacon of hope. This kind of research shows that science is closing in on the specific, tangible levers that can restore control and quiet the storm.
Yeah.
It's not about willpower, it's about circuitry.
The more we understand the mechanics, the better we can drive the machine. A perfect place to leave it.
Agreed.
Stay curious, everyone. We will see you on the next deep dive.
Thanks for tuning in to the Health Headliner podcast by To Digital. Like and subscribe for more health news and breakthroughs. Stay healthy and informed. See you next time.